All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where you attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. Hopefully this time without a microphone that's on mute.
Yes, the again means we actually had to restart this because I had the microphone on mute.
Our brains have thick candy shells.
Yeah, we were talking, you would have just seen moving mouths, and that would be not very interesting. Well, even less interesting than we normally are. Yes. So what we wanted to talk about today, we started with Kyrie Irving. He's in the news.
Yeah, and the stuff that was making me mad about it and wanting to talk about it when I was, looking up at the TV yesterday isn't the substance exactly of what's going on. I'll send you over to Jason Whitlock's channel, Fearless, where he is literally the only person I've seen actually tell you what's going on. And this is what made me so mad, just looking up at the TV and seeing the banner headline of Kyrie Irving under fire for anti-Semitic comments, for anti-Semitic posts. You haven't explained why. You're just telling all of your viewing audience, well, it was anti-Semitic, so take our word for it and now understand that this person is bad. Whitlock, in defending Irving, is the only person I've seen fairly give both sides about what's going on here and why this is primarily about the Black Hebrew Israelites and their ideology and why they are considered anti-Semitic. And it goes into a rabbit hole I don't want to go down right now because it's kind of wacky. It's one of those things where you read it and you go, all right, I understand that, but it still makes no sense and I'm confused. But just the narrative is what annoyed me so much. Later, that one of them, I believe it was SportsCenter, changed their banner. Maybe people were complaining, maybe someone grew a bit of ethics, and instead they had changed it to post containing anti-Semitic tropes, which is a big difference.
Yeah.
And as we were saying in our silent movie, the other thing that annoyed the crap out of me was seeing the comments from Silver, the league commissioner, that he was upset that Irving didn't offer an unqualified apology.
Yeah, which realistically is called nuance,
So you're not even allowed to explain yourself. You're not even allowed to have a debate. If you say something that is deemed wrongthink, period, the end, you must recant and have a stall in a show trial and profess your repentance. And kudos to Irving for sticking to his guns and saying, look, this is what I did. This is why I did it. This is what I believed. This is where, calling me anti-Semitic is absurd. And he defended himself on that, but that's not what the media
and it's
hear.
Consistent with the character. And
Yes.
I don't believe in coincidences at this point in too many things. And what I want to see is how many other people in some sort of light, but are in good favor, have posted the same thing or anything similar to that. Because Kyrie Irving, remember, was already public enemy #1 because of his refusal to get inoculated against his will, because he already had the virus, and he's young and healthy. His reasoning there, and it's not worth risk benefit ratios. It's what we do in all of medicine. It's what I do in exercise. Say if someone says never do this exercise, well, I'm like, well, is this exercise worth the risk to do? That's a different way of looking at this. It's not saying never get inoculated. Is it a benefit to me personally, which is how we should be viewing medicine, not as a population, but is it a benefit to me personally compared to the risk? Yes, behind the neck presses will develop your deltoids better than in front of the neck presses for the most part. But is it worth the risk to your rotator cuff? Every once in a while, for some people who have really mobile shoulders, okay, we might be able to do that. But I'm not going to do it with someone who sits at a desk all day like this, because they're going to jack their shoulder. Same thing in this arena. And he took the risk benefit, and as a free person in what we tried to say is the free United States of America, he made that choice. But because of city mandates, he could not perform his profession. This, remember, everybody's like, oh, private companies and things. No, this was actually New York City law that prevented him from playing for his team, not from sitting in the stand right behind his team, from talking to them, you know, airborne virus and all, from shouting and yelling and cheering them on, but to actually step on the hard wood, because apparently this airborne virus reacts differently over the court than it does in the stands.
The point about the risk benefit analysis is good when we're talking, especially specifically about medicine and health. And the analogy I thought of when you were talking is malaria drugs. So if you go on vacation, or I know people have gone on mission trips or gone to work or school or whatever in, say, Equatorial Africa, they give you malaria drugs that you're supposed to take regularly. They work very well, and malaria is very bad, so you need to take these drugs. Some people don't like to take them, so you have to stay on top of people to make sure you take your drugs. Be funky to you, like make you have night terrors.
Hold on, there we go.
We're good?
Yep, but in case they can do funky things.
Right, so the drugs can do funky things to you, but malaria is way, way worse. So you need to take the drugs and take them on a regular schedule. Likewise, on the other hand, it would be irresponsible and dumb for a doctor or a health agency to say malaria is a killer and a big problem. Here, everyone needs to take these. No, I don't. We haven't had a malaria case in the US since I think the 50s. So that would be dumb. It's not worth the risk to me, because my chances of getting malaria are statistically zero.
You know, you could say that about a lot of these, like the rabies vaccine. You know, most of us just avoid rabid animals, but if you're going to study bats in the Congo, you probably ought to get your rabies vaccine before you go, or study nocturnal animals in general, realistically. So, but we also get our canines rabies vaccinated, because they don't have a prefrontal cortex that's as developed as ours is. They do, it's just not the same. And they see squirrel and attack it. They don't see squirrel foaming at the mouth and say, oh, that's probably not a good idea. They don't see skunk out in the middle of the day, which is a bad sign because they're nocturnal animals, and say, he might have something wrong with him. So they just still go after it, as anybody who has had a skunk sprayed dog will attest to. So we do that for them because they don't make the same decisions we do, where if I saw a skunk out in the middle of the day, I'm gonna be like, animal control, we've got a problem here. And that animal control person is probably vaccinated against rabies, because they handle these animals on a daily basis. So this is why there is nuance to this argument. But back to your point of his statements, and automatically he's being labeled with something, which is a very broad brush, by the way. The anti-Semitic label is being tossed around to where it's almost losing its meaning, just like racist did. And it's actually even broader than they try to do, because apparently anti-Semitic means anything Arab. Who was it? Ian Crossland brought up the actual definition, and it was everybody from a certain area of the world, and it included
not what's been historically.
Well, it's been historical pop culture, but actual definition wise. But even still, we don't even know the exact definition because it's been thrown around so much. But yeah, ever since the 1930s and 40s, it's had a specific, more specific meaning. But still, I doubt he would be under the same scrutiny right now if he had not taken his stand earlier. Just like the other famous darkly complected person that is under scrutiny for anti-Semitism because of his, look at all the famous rappers that backed Louis Farrakhan. They're still fine.
Mhm.
But this one guy was not quite politically person of color. And then he makes a statement that was pretty, not the greatest statement in the world and not the most intelligent, but he's kind of gone off his rocker. But instead of being, hey, he's gone off his rocker, the narrative is he's a right-wing conspiracy theorist. Well, now you're kind of shaping an argument for your own gain at that point.
Yeah, a conspiracy theorist, just go, it's a public document, go read the autopsy report. So that's all he said regarding that issue, which was the other thing he got in trouble for.
So you're gonna have to explain this one a little bit to me, more to me, because I don't know the.
So
you brought this up to me. I don't know the context of it because I haven't been paying attention to the NBA and I don't watch it Whitlock.
So the things that got Kanye canceled, there was the how do I phrase this nicely? He has been for a little while now calling out the record label executives and ownership who are predominantly secular Jews. And so he was already on thin ice for that. And then he came out with a tweet that was pretty stupid and a little incoherent that kind of could have been taken as a threat. Kind of. Or to your point, he's just kind of off his rocker. And that's, I believe, when he was taken off of Twitter. And then he went on some podcast I've never heard of, but is apparently really popular, and was talking about George Floyd. And saying that he said that George Floyd died from fentanyl, not from a knee on his neck, which was in the testimony of the coroner and was in the autopsy report. He is now being sued by the George Floyd family and the media, who's slavering all over this because, to your point, Kanye was already persona non grata for other things he had said. And so none of these media outlets who are breathlessly talking about how, you know, he slandered the Floyd family and they're suing him. Kanye donated millions of dollars to the Floyd family to set up a trust for his kids.
That I didn't know.
Yeah.
Well, and if you want to speak on a meta level, we can take Chauvin out of the equation and make him an extreme bad guy and the murderer that you could put a good argument that he is, and still say fentanyl killed George Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
Because without the fentanyl crisis in America, George Floyd is never under a knee.
Yeah.
The man was an addict, and for that we should have compassion. But it shouldn't have ended up the way it did in the scope of what happened in the United States.
But that's back to the Irving comments, and that's nuance, and you're not allowed to have that. There is a narrative, and the narrative must be very narrowly focused, because you're not allowed to think too much. Because if you critically think too much, then, you know, rather than adjusting the narrative, you might destroy the narrative, and we can't have that.
Well, and remember, labels are easy. You know,
Yeah.
Kyrie Irving, the anti-vaxxer, anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
Don't listen to anything he says. He's those two things. And realistically, this actually segues us into the article I brought up. Now we're getting calls for this. Let's declare a pandemic amnesty. Let's focus on the future and fix the problems we still need to solve. The gist of the article is people made mistakes on both sides. Let's all come together. The problem with this is they're still pushing the same policies, and we're still under the influence of the powers that were I mean, we're still under the EUA. That was a mistake, but we're still under it, even though the pandemic is over, quoting our president. Of course, the White House does not condone that statement, which who's the White House?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, the point is, first of all, we need public reconciliation from the people who did things nefariously. We need to address the issue of pharmaceutical money in our political system. Still, these are things we still need to do. We can't just say, oh, live and let live, forgive. See, forgive and forget is a horrible statement.
Yeah.
Forgive is virtuous, but you don't forget. There is a version of tit for tat in game theory that is like a trustworthy, forgiving tit for tat, where it's altruistic. You get screwed. I'll go altruistic and give you the benefit of the doubt, but you get screwed again. Now you respond in kind. That's forgiveness without forgetting. The only people that want you to forget are narcissists that want to keep doing their shit over and over again. The ones that gaslight you into, oh, he'll be better this time. He won't beat me again. He's learned his lesson. He went to jail for a day. He's not going to do it again. Then everything, they love bomb you for a while, and then soon as things get comfortable, boom, back in the hospital. That's exactly what these kind of people want the American public to do. Where are the people that were saying Trump should have conceded, it's the right thing to do, with Fauci? Mm-hmm. You talk about a man who bumbled his job, whether it was nefarious or accidental, from the beginning here, and refused to back down. In fact, he doubled down, said, I am the science. Listen to me. We're the same people. It's the same thing. You have a person that needs to step down, and he won't. Now, he will after December, because he knows he knows as a private citizen, he has more power for not being pulled up to the Senate Judiciary Committee. But up until then, I mean, he's still handing out grants for all the things that he says he's not doing. We brought that up in a previous episode and showed you the grant.
The mistakes were made on both sides, people. I would like them to explore that point further. Okay, what mistakes? By whom? What were the ramifications? What were the repercussions? What were the results? If you're going to say that, then you need to fully explore what those were. And then you need to step back and you say, is this something that should go without punishment? Yes.
Okay. People are going to immediately dismiss a cartoon like this and call it hyperbole.
But I love it.
Yeah. But it's not. Because yes, nobody actually got burned at the stake with literal fire. But how many game checks did Kyrie Irving have to give up?
There were people who were metaphorically burned at the stake, for sure.
And that's a privileged person.
Yeah.
How about healthcare workers that lost their job?
You
know, the thing about you brought up Aaron Rodgers. Did you bring it up in the silent episode or this one?
Well, you know what? I can't remember.
I can't remember either. Well, if it was a silent episode, Aaron Rodgers was on Rogan and he explained his whole experience in the NFL. Well, one thing that failed to get to the mainstream news audience was he was allergic to an ingredient in the inoculation. Not the spike itself, but one of the other ingredients that was a transport agent or a membrane or something along those lines. So it was actually a huge risk for him to take it because he could have an allergic reaction. You know, the thing you kind of avoid with your kid with regards to peanuts, so they don't die on you when they're 6 months old.
You're not allowed to. I've ranted about this before. I don't even remember what context, but I remember when we were recording once I ranted about how when we were kids, if it was your birthday, you would bring cupcakes or something to share with the class. You're not allowed to do that anymore. Everything has to be store bought, so you know precisely what ingredients are in it, so you can make sure that someone who might have an allergy doesn't accidentally get it. You're not allowed to, you know, like, okay, let's find
Which
out
is
if
funny
someone has an allergy.
because you have more control of what's in it if you don't buy it from the store. But
Right. But didn't Dr. Victory talk about Dr. Victory? Didn't she talk about that? I don't think it was the McCullough episode, but I think it was her. I remember her talking about, you know, and luckily she's a doctor, so she knew that she was allergic to
oh yeah,
an ingredient in it.
I think it's the same one. And
yeah.
which is the thing. Yes, a very small percentage of the population are allergic to this thing, but they should be allowed to say no if they are.
And she had to go in for some sort of medical procedure, and they wanted her to be vaccinated before they would do it. I'm allergic to this ingredient. They didn't care, and they still kept trying to get her to take the vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
That's insane.
So here's this is the problem with this. First of all, you should be allowed to make medical decisions based on your own health and situation and the risk reward ratios that go with it. And for someone who's allergic to this ingredient, the risk is super high because you could just die. How many of the VAERS reported deaths were an autoimmune response, which is an allergy in some cases, right? So knowing you have this allergy is already one thing. What if you don't know you have this allergy, but you're still forced to take something? There's no, we haven't gotten the label that says, if you have, consult your doctor, check if you have XYZ allergy, which we know exists in X percentage of the population. We're not getting that. That's called informed consent, right? So Kyrie Irving lost game checks. How about the medical workers that refused to take it because either A, they had the disease already, and we all know how the immune system works by now, and if you don't, go buy a $10 first edition book on Amazon. That kind of stuff hasn't changed all that much in the last 100 years. Fauci himself said, if you had the flu, you don't need the flu shot because you've had the best vaccine. Same thing with other airborne diseases. The reason you get the shot is because you want to get it before you ever get the disease. What happens after that is, congratulations, you made it through. Now you can go on with your life if you survived. But the burn at the stake analogy, how many of those people lost their jobs and they were paycheck to paycheck? How many of those committed suicide? Suicide was up. Alcoholism was up 300%. Just stress-related illness, cardiovascular disease is the biggest increase with excess deaths. We were talking about this the other day. Excess deaths in cardiovascular disease from atherosclerosis is through the roof right now. Well, a lot of people in one camp want to blame it on inoculation. A lot of people want to blame it on the disease itself and residual effects. But how about just the fact that everything that increases that increased over the last 2 years? Alcoholism, drug use, stress, inoculations,
just the basics of
illnesses.
People are eating more and less active.
Yep.
At the same
weight
time.
gain. What was the numbers I brought up in a previous episode? 30%.
Yeah, it was 30 or 30 something percent. Yeah,
and I think
it was more in children.
Yeah, it was a massive increase in obesity rates in the United States and pretty much all Western cultures. And well, now you've got another comorbidity that increases all-cause mortality. Every single cause, especially cardiovascular disease. So people were fired from that. People have increased their death risk in the next 5 years because of all of these things. So yes, it is akin to being burned at the stake. Not as painful, maybe, but it's just a slower burn.
You still get your life destroyed.
Yeah. Well, and realistically, look at Kanye. He can't bank where he used to bank. Pretty much all his
Forgot about
sponsors
that.
left him.
Yeah.
His label left him. You know who didn't leave him? They did in public persona, but guess what didn't get canceled? All his collaborated songs. Do you see Jamie Foxx saying take down slow jams? Kanye West was in slow jams. He produced it. No, because Jamie Foxx still makes money on slow jams. So look at the threads. If you can say, take this guy down in a way that doesn't affect me, people are going to do it all day long. And I think that's what annoys me the most about all of this. But
well, that was one of Whitlock's big rants on the Irving thing is, all right, so he has to be canceled because he posted this image of this movie poster for a documentary that's got some problematic stuff in it. All right. Where's the outrage at Bezos? Because the documentary is available on Amazon. So they're making money off it. Irving wasn't making money off of this, whatever his thoughts were on the documentary. He was just throwing this image out there and saying nothing except putting the image up. Bezos and Amazon are actually making money off of it. So if it's so bad, why isn't there outrage there? Why is it so selective? And to your point, well, gee, maybe it's because he was already in hot water for other things that he had said and done.
Yeah, they want to discredit things he's already said and things he's already stood up for with anything that comes out in the future. I mean, for the media with someone like Kyrie, it would be just like a gold mine if it came out he hit his girlfriend or something. It would be everywhere. We would all know about it. And we would judge him accordingly, which is you did this shitty thing. But this is actually a kind of a common thing that happens, especially with athletes, and you don't hear about it with the ones that are toting the line, unless it gets caught on video or something. Like what was the guy in the Ray Rice?
Yeah, the incident was already known about. He had already been given a suspension. I think it was like 4 to 6 games or something like that. But then the video came out.
Yeah, and he didn't just hit her; he jacked her like she was a 300-pound lineman.
Yeah, and the video made it so sensational that I think he was booted for. I don't think he ever made it back.
He was suspended indefinitely, and then he was reinstated, but no team wanted to touch him.
Okay, I was pretty sure that he never played again, but I couldn't remember if he was kicked out of the league or if it was just because no one wanted him.
But again, it's all about the visual. With Kyrie, it's about the visual, right? Look at Joe Mixon. This guy beat a woman up within inches of her life almost. And he got a suspension in college, and then he was reinstated, and now he's a Pro Bowler in the NFL making millions and millions of dollars. And everybody's like, oh, he's redeemed. No, this is something you don't come back from like that. But because he's not standing out in any other way, and there's no video of it for everybody to see, it just kind of died. It probably wouldn't have died if he was already in the NFL when it happened. But because it was something that happened, I think it was a sophomore year of college, and then he went through that process with their disciplinary thing. I think that's probably what pushed it under the rug a little bit. But had he been a Pro Bowler to begin with, he might have been strung up on that one, but who knows? But yeah, as far as amnesty, no, there's too much. Now, yes, for those that trusted the people we're talking about, and they're coming around to the fact that, oh my gosh, I was being lied to. Yes, 100% amnesty for them, even if they were shitty people in the process. Because being shitty because you are literally convinced you're killing people, other people are killing people, that is forgivable if you go down that golden path of, I truly believed this, and now in hindsight, I can see all the things I should have seen, and I'm going to learn from this. But those people, yes, but not.
But clearly there is no learning, because the video is making the rounds now of course we didn't test for it. We had to move at the speed of science and react to the market. That should have caused a 180 on numerous policies. It didn't.
I think there is, and it's not as open as you would like it to be, but there is. And
Well, it's not a reversal. I think they're trying to sweep some things under the rug.
yeah, and it's again, it's not as open and honest as you would like it to see, but the trends all point to, like, let's look at vaccination rates in general.
Mhm.
How many young people rushed out and got it when the essential workers were given the opportunity, right?
Yeah.
But then it was 12 to 16-year-olds were allowed, and it was like 20% went out and got it for their kids. And then 6 to 12-year-olds was approved in the EUA. We're still under 5%, I think.
Yeah.
People are figuring it out. They're saying, you know what? Why the hell am I going to do this to my kid?
But the policies aren't really changing, and we still have to beat around the bush when we talk about it on tech platforms. Because they're not changing.
Yeah, there are certain things that you can say now, like this might have been too controversial a year ago that we're talking about right now, but at the same time, if you were to bring up VAERS data or something along those lines, now you're pushing the envelope a little bit more. And again, who's censoring? Is it, well, we know it's the government from the DHS documents that everybody's calling it a leak, but it's discovery from a lawsuit. For those that aren't familiar with the suit, if state of Missouri is suing the federal government for collusion with tech companies to censor all kinds of things. This is covering the Hunter Biden laptop. This lawsuit is also covering the Pfizer documents, the FDA documents, everything that was held from the public in the name of, to produce mandates to, because it was even after OSHA was shot down that they still said the healthcare sector had to get inoculated. And well, why? This is the most exposed cohort we have in the country. We should be studying them to see how strong this immunity is, because now we've got a big giant population of people who would probably be just fine with you studying them, because the better medicine is, the more studied it is, the easier their job is and the safer their job is.
And they're already familiar with the process. Yeah, what else are we gonna talk about?
You wanted to talk about Crowder and jiu-jitsu.
Oh. Yeah. All right. So he's done this before. It annoys the crap out of me. But Crowder will go off on these rants about how basically anything that's not jiu-jitsu is just some middle-aged guy in his pajamas trying to scam you for money, and that it's all everything else is useless or fake. Bruce Lee was a con artist and a fraud, and this is, all justified because he once had someone tell him in all seriousness that Jet Li was the baddest man on the planet and could beat up anyone, including UFC fighters or professional boxers. And then as added support, he showed a clip of Jackie Chan and Sammo and some of the guys doing some of the kind of traditional Peking acrobatic stuff.
Yeah. And it's tempting to take that route when you look at Kung Fu theater. Because it's embellished, it's over the top, but realistically, they're talking about what they would consider supernatural type ability in the people they're portraying in these movies. That's why they use wires and stuff in Crouching Tiger to fly through the bamboo, right? So there was this spiritual kind of aspect to it, and it's movies, it's sensationalized. But when Bruce Lee would say, the stop kick is an effective tool because I'm using my longest weapon against your closest target, that's physics. Yeah, that's a hard move to pull off. I will grant any naysayers that, because it is a smaller target too, and it's a moving target, and hitting a moving target is very difficult. But it's still effective if you can master it. to some degree. When I transitioned from more traditional stuff to MMA, there were things I had to unlearn. I mean, obviously the pattern katas are realistically just exercise at some point. They take you through full motions. You do get a lot of practice with the movements themselves, but to say it's akin to sparring would be ridiculous. But if you combine the two, well, now we can start talking a little bit.
Yeah.
Or if you break the kata up into its bits and parts, now you've got basically what amounts to combos in boxing. Right.
Yes. And the point of them being to drill muscle memory into you, because in an actual fight, an actual self-defense situation, or even in a sparring or a competition in the ring, you need to react. And you've actually talked about this, haven't you? The neurology of it, that you need to react more quickly than you can think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there are mechanisms for that. And we've talked fitness before about neurological adaptation and what that means for your muscles. So you know, in the same way that when we were in 6th grade math, my mom made us do timed multiplication tables all the time to drill it into you so that you knew it and you didn't have to think about it.
Well, and this is why I hate that he lumped Bruce Lee in with stylized opera style kung fu theater, because this is Bruce Lee 101. I fear the man who has practiced one kick 1,000 times more than the man who has practiced 1,000 kicks one time. He was all about mastering the basics and making it automatic. Mm-hmm. So that way it just happened when the occasion arose. When someone's fist is coming at your face, you automatically did the parry. You didn't do some stylized movement. There's a fist coming at your face and you automatically deflect it to the side. And in his system, you deflect it and fire off. That's not something you have to think about. You don't say, fist coming here. If I hit him right on that part of his bone, he won't be able to react. And then I could trap that hand and I can come over the top and give him a back fist to the nose. You don't think that. It just happens. And he even used that terminology. I don't punch. The punch happens by itself.
And that is something that is a problem and has been criticized about the more traditional martial arts is, and this is where the Crowder part is dumb. No, those things do work, and they could work in a real world situation. The problem with them is the way they are structured. They're layering, and it takes a long time to build those layers, so that if you get up to someone who is a black belt in whatever and has been doing it for a long time, they have these techniques, and they have these techniques ingrained in them so that they can handle themselves very well. And it's especially annoying when Crowder does it, because he's a huge UFC fan.
But we need go no further than the UFC to dismantle his jiu-jitsu argument. It wouldn't be mixed martial arts if one martial art was supreme. Mm-hmm. Again, everybody's like, jiu-jitsu. I think it just sounds nice. Jiu-jitsu is great, but you change the name of almost every move there, and you've got catch-can wrestling. Or Japanese jiu-jitsu versus Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Mm-hmm. The arm only bends in so many ways, and you bend it the opposite way. That's the principle. The blood flows through these two arteries to the brain. Cut off those two arteries. There's a million ways to do it. And jiu-jitsu knows a lot of those ways. Catch wrestling knows a lot of those ways. Pancrase knows a lot of those ways. Old school Chinese Chin Na knows a lot of those ways. The Bushido artists knew those ways. It's knowing physiology and how to manipulate it to win a damn fight.
And well, I knew you were going to go there eventually. Where I was going actually was freaking Lyoto Machida. He trained in traditional karate. And he used it in the ring. He used elements of it. That practice, those techniques, the way he would move, the way he would strike. For crying out freaking loud, he knocked out Randy Couture with a crane kick. Now, it doesn't look like it does in The Karate Kid, no, but that's the technique he did. And that was basically the same technique that Silva used against Akiyama. Of, hey, look at my hands, whack, foot to the face. So the idea that it's all nonsense, except for jujitsu or things like that, is just nonsensical.
I should have had this ready. I was looking for, there's a video, and you probably, I don't know if, well, YouTube censors kind of arbitrarily, but there is a video. And Coach Blauer, who's a big self-defense kind of personality, he always mentions this. It's two mixed martial artists in Brazil that one of them was UFC quality. He was actually a UFC quality fighter, and they get attacked by like 3 or 4 guys at a gas station, and it's caught on the gas station video. And this is where the video comes from. And they get their asses handed to them. And this is why I hate the UFC comparisons and everything. Because the reason they got their ass handed to them is because they were trying to fight like they were in the ring. There's no rules on the street. This guy's squaring up with another guy, and yeah, squared up, he was superior to that one guy across from him. Another guy comes up behind him and hits him in the back of the head with a 2x4. He's out, he's gone, he goes to the hospital. The other guy gets his ass kicked too by these just street thugs. Fighting, mixed martial arts is the most accurate thing we have in sport to it, but it is still sport. And jujitsu is very great sport unless you finish the moves, right? So jujitsu is great for sport, but if I'm fighting somebody who has a baseball bat, my jujitsu is not going to do me very good until I can close the distance enough that I can neutralize the fact that he has a baseball bat. And this is where the jujitsu crowd has become as religious as the woke crowd, or as a actual religious crowd, or the Dems or the Republicans. Vegans, yeah. And no. Yes, we should all train to fight, and jujitsu is a good avenue, and there's plenty of places to do it. But at the same time, if you are completely married to the art, it's like that scene in Napoleon Dynamite, the only good scene from the movie. Grab my hand. No, other hand. No, my other hand. It's still something that's still a system that you have to learn to adapt your body or your mind and your body to every situation. And that's on you. That's not on the system itself.
Right. And going back to Bruce Lee, there's a great interview with him where he says something like, unless an alien comes down from outer space with totally different anatomy, there's only one way of fighting, and it's the human way of fighting. We all have the same limbs, they all move the same way, and thus we all have the same weapons and vulnerabilities. And if you watch Enter the Dragon, his most famous movie, yes, it's stylized. Yes, there's a camera there, and he's obviously doing things for effect. And you can especially see that when he finishes a strike, because he's clearly posing for the camera for added effect. But that was a real strike. That was a real technique. He was very purposeful in that. He wanted to show his philosophy of martial arts on the film. That's why he was considered revolutionary in Hong Kong cinema, because everyone after him was trying to be a copycat, and the wire fu started to die out.
even with the best martial arts movies, using a movie to even visualize how you would fight in a real situation is like using porn to learn how to fuck. It's there for the camera.
Yeah.
Even the good stuff is done in a way that it shows off for the camera so you can see it in your, on your couch or in the movie theater. And it looks better than it actually performs. So you have to actually get into a training situation where you can mimic as close as possible without getting hurt or hurting somebody, an actual event in real life. Sparring is key. Now, the great thing about jujitsu, and this is where they do get it right, part of your jujitsu class is free flow sparring.
Yeah.
Every class you free flow spar. Now, it's sparred in a very limited situation. Start on your knees, you kind of come up to each other and grab, and nobody's allowed to punch each other, but it still is a free flow. It's a really hard thing to do, though. And this is where I think your striking arts could use a little bit better, because it's really hard to spar with kicks and punches and even the more fancified. How do you do a spinning back kick lightly? Right. Yeah. you want to hit somebody just hard enough that they feel it, maybe grunt a little bit. Well, you got your entire body weight in the air, so there's nothing to stop your momentum before you actually make contact, which is the point of the technique. You leave the ground to put all your body weight plus the acceleration of gravity into your target through your foot or your hand or whatever you're using, because now that's a lot of force in a pinpoint area. Well, how do you do that in a real situation without actually hurting somebody?
Yeah.
Now we're getting the fuzzy areas. You just got to do it so much in practice that hopefully it connects in real life.
Well, and that's why any of the MMA schools I've ever gone to, they separate out boxing, and that was kind of our hardest sparring because it's the easiest to do in relative safety. Put on the headgear, put on the gloves, and then you can at least throw hands in relative safety.
Interesting tangent on headgear. They took it out of the Olympics, right?
Really?
Because they found out it's actually safer not to wear it. And it's a psychological thing. It has nothing to do with the headgear itself or the mechanisms of it. It's the fact that people put themselves in more dangerous situations knowing they had the headgear on.
Makes sense.
You protect yourself more when you're vulnerable.
That's a standard human thing.
Yeah. They also there was factories that put on the work gloves, they put painted images of the bones of the hand, and people had less losses of fingers in machinery because a gloved hand gives you a feeling of a detachment from the hand that's underneath. Whereas if you can see a hand on it, you're more mentally focused on the fact that you have a hand there, that you're pushing something into a machine or moving. So it's kind of cool on that. But that was a tangent. Sorry.
Interesting tangent.
Interesting tangent. But yeah, this whole jujitsu craze, jujitsu is great. I incorporated it into my game, even though technically I was a catch can wrestler, because it gave me freedom. So the thing about wrestling versus the softer grappling arts, which I'll call it that, jujitsu, Japanese and Brazilian, as well as the shoot offs of that, is wrestling. You never want to be on your back. There's no reason to go to your back in a wrestling match because you can be pinned and you lose, right? And it's all about power and dominance from the top position. But adding that softer art, you get comfortable on your back. And yeah, you still are probably better off in top position in any situation. But just that knowing you have the security blanket of, I can do a lot of damage in either position. So I'm going to go for the best one. But if something happens, he's better than me in this situation, or I miscalculated or something, I still can do well in this other position. It really allows you to it actually allows you to take more chances. You take more chances when you know you have a safety valve than when you don't. So
for me, the best thing about any grappling art or sport, and why I recommend it and why it's the one thing I made my son do, is because you are going to be uncomfortable. The entire point of it is to put you in very uncomfortable positions. So there's a mental component there that, to your point about being able to spar with striking sports and arts, you just don't get as much, or it's harder to achieve than with wrestling or jiu-jitsu or some offshoot thereof.
Well, and having a more finesse kind of option, it allows for size differences too, right? So I'm what the Go Ruck guys would call a super medium. I'm 6 foot and about 190 pounds. That is not spectacularly big, and it's not small. So in real life, if I was to get into a hairy situation, I have about a 50% chance of being bigger than my opponent or being smaller than my opponent. So having a finesse component to your game really does help if the other guy can just pick you up and slam you down.
Yep.
I remember I was training and I was really getting good at the grappling portion. Again, the jiu-jitsu. I told you my former coach Mike Rangel told me, he said, your jiu-jitsu is getting good, but your wrestling sucks. But
oh
yeah, which is funny because I started with wrestling and went to jiu-jitsu. But I got a guy in a almost, I would call it a perfect textbook armbar. So again, we're going to say jiu-jitsu isn't everything, because this, by the books, I had everything. I had wrist control. I had over the top. I had my hip right on his elbow, just in the right place. I had my knees, one knee under his armpit, one over the top, and I was about to crank. Well, he outweighed me by 40 pounds, and it was all beef. And he picked me up like this, one arm. He stood up, and he said, whoa. And I learned that day, when they pick you up like that, let go and live to fight another day.
Yeah.
But yeah, that hurt. I love Kenny. Kenny was a great guy, but he hurt me that day. Especially since you're only on pads this thick when you're in those schools. It's not like the wrestling gyms where you got those big old thick mats that, these are those Dolomar compressed foam mats. But yeah, to have a finesse game would have helped me there if I could have, done a couple pressure point things that we learned in actually our traditional Chinese Kung Fu classes, which I actually used in the ring quite a bit. If I had someone in the clinch, there's a little pressure point there. You can move them where you want to move them, and it doesn't take much. So those are things I actually transferred to the ring because they worked. The hitting somebody with this part of your wrist, this is really hard, but at the same time, nobody thinks of it if you're trained to box or you're trained in jiu-jitsu. But I would be in the clinch and someone would have dominant clinch on me, pulling my head down, and I would pop them on the inside of their where the bicep and the the corticobrachialis comes in. There's that little space right there where there's a bunch of arteries and nerves that run through, and then there's just bone. Even if you're buff, there's still that space there. I can feel that radial nerve firing in my fingertips just by pressing there. If anybody wants to try it, I would whack somebody with that part of my wrist, and you get a lot of power in that flick. If I tried to hit them like this, there's not a lot of power there, but I could flick it, boom, like that, and ooh, they would move their arm, and then I could scoop under and get out and counter wrestle. So these little things, if I just boxed and did jiu-jitsu, I wouldn't have known.
There's a reason some of these arts have been around for centuries, if not millennia, in some form or another. And that's why Bruce Lee had the philosophy of take what is useful, discard what is not, add what is specifically your own.
Which is my philosophy in training. I mean, you can use that in almost everything in your life. You can use it in coding. You can use it in whatever. It's a great philosophy. Now, he is behind modern people, but we're expecting somebody who lived 50 years ago to have modern knowledge. If he was still alive today, what would he have been? We don't know. He died. When did he die?
73, I thought.
73. So we're talking almost 50 years ago. But look at where he was compared to other people in 1973. That's the difference. No, he was actually, if you read his notes, he was actually studying jujitsu at the time when he died. And judo, he loved judo.
Well, you see it in his biggest movie, Enter the Dragon, and he finishes that opening fight not with a knockout, but with an armbar.
Well, he also gets out of something by biting him. use what you can, right? There was no rule against biting in their fight in the movie, and he bit him. He was in a bad position. He said, "Ow." Biting can help, but I don't recommend it all the time, because if someone yanks away, they can yank a tooth out. But that, and there's bloodborne illnesses and all of those things. But if you're really in a life or death situation, use everything, man.
Yeah.
But I'll give you another example. MMA, from classical to MMA, that benefited me. I like to grapple in mixed martial arts, because I just had more of an affinity to it, and I'm a pretty grounded person, personality wise, but also in how I move and everything. So having contact was great instead of being in space for me. So when you wrap your hands, people will make this brick of a wrap, because people break their hands in MMA, because you got the 4-ounce glove versus boxing, which you have the 12 to 14-ounce glove. Well, people from a boxing background would do this brick of a wrap and then put the glove over the top of it. It's really hard to grapple. It's really hard to grab. But because I came from a classical martial arts standpoint, I never broke my hands, because they were conditioned to hit with bare knuckles, because we did everything bare knuckle in the traditional arts. And when I did the Shaolin, or when we did Kempo, or all those variations we explored as we moved around and stuff, and you learn to hit with the top 2 knuckles. You're conditioned. We had that Muay Thai board where you would just hit it as a pad this thick, and you're just toughening the hands against it. And so I would have one little strip, just enough that the ref would come in and put his little X on it, and never broke a hand in competition or training. And that allowed me to have all my digits mobile for grappling. So this benefit of conditioning of my tissue that I only got because I did these traditional arts instead of boxing or jujitsu allowed me to have more freedom to do something without an injury. Because how many of these fights do you see the guy kind of put the brakes on, dominating the fight, and then they kind of coast for about 3 rounds, and you find out after the fight they broke their hand? The forehead's really hard. You hit somebody in the forehead, it's really easy to break your hand. But again,
Hardest bone in the body.
Yeah. But again, people don't think about it who are locked into a style. I mean, you get great grip with jujitsu, but you don't condition the bones the same way you do with doing jumping knuckle push-ups like we used to do in what was that? Sifu. That was Stillwater.
Brain fart.
Yeah, we're brain farting on him, but the instructor was Alexander Mueller, but the main guy, I'm brain farting in the name. But yeah, when I was under Sin Quang Te for Shaolin in San Antonio, we would do fingertip. Our push-up looked like this. You do a fingertip, you drop to a knuckle, and you did it in midair. So you would crash on your knuckle, and then you would crash on this side of your wrist, and then you crash into a regular push-up, and then back onto the fingertips. And that was one. Each one of those was a separate push-up, and we do those till you were passing out. So these are the secondary benefits you don't get when you lock into one thing. Anything else?
Nope.
All right, I kind of got to get ready to get back to work anyways. So we didn't do the intro the same way we did in our silent one. We're in the garage today because we had a football game yesterday that we went to. Philadelphia Eagles versus the Houston Texans. Texans put up a fight for 2 quarters, 3 quarters, and Philadelphia was the 8-0 Philadelphia Eagles that they are, and closed it out. But it was but we were 1-1 with Philly yesterday. We lost the football game, but we won the World Series game.
All right. Well, we'll see y'all next time.
No medical advice, disclaimers, no fitness advice. except to explore. And if you are going to a dangerous situation in any of those arenas, please get a doctor's note and make sure that you're making good decisions for yourself and your family.